Actually, I'm going to try to record to my own computer. So I think that that should be working fine. So thanks everyone for your time. I'm John Santore. I live in Assembly District 51 on 23rd Street in South Slope, Sunset Park. And I'm a member of the Democratic Party, the Assembly District Committee for the 51st ADC, Assembly District Committee here in Brooklyn. And so I reached out to Victoria Alexander. Did you go by Victoria Alexander, Victoria
How
Massey
you
Crawford?
made my maiden name?
Terrific. And Victoria lives in Red Hook, and she's been an activist with Voices of the Waterfront, focused on the Brooklyn Marine Terminal rezoning proposal, which is, as far as I understand it, currently in limbo, and it's unclear where it's going. But this is an issue that's been developing for months now. So I think this is one of the more important issues. This is a huge issue. It's a huge amount of land. It would be a huge amount of money. It's a very significant, as far as I can tell, one of the most significant proposed changes to Red Hook in a long time in terms of size, scale, and of course, in terms of the number of people who could potentially come into Red Hook if the housing portion of this moves through. And there's also a lot of industrial implications as well. So I think this is one of the issues that our Assembly District Committee should be talking about, and that's why we wanted to chat about it. So Victoria, do you want to begin? And actually, I'm sorry, I should just say that um, if anybody has questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the chat if you would like, and I can circle back to you. So we'll engage in a dialogue for a little while. But if anybody has questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand, and then I'd be happy to turn over the mic to anybody who wants to engage and add thoughts and ask questions as well. So Victoria, we've added a couple more people here. Victoria, do you want to introduce yourself and talk about your history of being a Red Hook resident and just sort of set the scene here?
Sure. Hi, guys. My name is Victoria Alexander. I'm a Red Hook resident and business owner. I've lived in the neighborhood or area for 22 years. I'm a former Community Board 6 member for 8 years. I'm a current AD 51 county committee member, and I've been working with, also the co-founder of the Red Hook Business Alliance and founding member of Resilient Red Hook. So I've been doing a lot of activism, especially it all started after Hurricane Sandy here in the neighborhood, where I really got involved in the community. And I've been really so lucky to work with John and Nico and other community members, really trying to shape the narrative for the community around the Brooklyn Marine Terminal. That's hopefully.
Terrific. And Nico is here now. Nico is also a member and a leader of Voices of the Waterfront. Nico, would you like to introduce yourself and talk about your history of being a Red Hook resident? Nico, sorry, I muted your mic. If you can unmute your mic. And you can also mention, of course, Nico is the chair of the Assembly District Committee for 8051. Go ahead, Nico.
Hi, everybody. I've been here far less than almost everybody here, 3 years, but I hit the ground running and have loved this community for a long time. Um, Getting involved here locally was a no-brainer, and this is just this is the main issue right now for me. Uh, uh, I don't believe anybody should have this responsibility or this obligation to give away the rights to what's happening here for generations going forward. And that's what the yes vote means. It means our electeds aren't involved. It means we're not involved now that we're all kind of awoken to the possibilities. And there's some great possibilities here. It should not be taken over by an entity that's not from here, just for profit in order to have our beautiful waterfront, which is a gem. And I'm privileged to be a part of this process.
Thanks, Nico. So I'm just going to, I have a series of very elementary questions. This is a big issue that's been going on for a while, and it's something that I would like to learn more about. So, I'm someone who wants to learn about this. I've attended a few of the meetings that Nico and Victoria and other people helped to organize. they were well attended. There were a lot of people there. But I don't know a ton of the backstory here, and it certainly seems complicated, and I'm sure there are many, many perspectives. So this conversation won't represent all the perspectives. Certainly be happy to host other conversations as well. But I guess I wanted to begin just by asking Victoria and Nico to share thoughts on the neighborhood, the BMT area as it exists currently, and talk about the proposal, where the proposal emerged from, where and when it emerged from, and how it would change the area in your estimation and the estimation of Voices of the Waterfront, which is the organization that you helped to put together. So can you, either one of you can take it away with that question?
Thanks, Nico. Thanks, Nico. So, this is something that is not new, actually. In 2006, the Economic Development Corporation, the EDC, tried to do a similar redevelopment of the port. In my opinion, so that this is something that they have been trying to developed for a very long time. And as somebody in this group, Maria Nieto, has said, this is engineered blight. It's a fabrication. They have siphoned off the resources and the possibility of the port to make it dilapidated. The Port Authority had lots of opportunities and funding to invest and into this property that they were the fosterers of. They should have been maintaining the property. And so this is 122 acres of waterfront property that is designated in a manufacturing port designation that is a public land. And this is a private a public land swap that the EDC and has negotiated with the city and the state, something called a GPP, a general project plan, which is the land use transaction that they're trying to use instead of a ULURP. So it would bypass a lot of the city regulations and the input for community. At the beginning of this process, I think it was going to be 11,000 new units, and now it's down to 6,000. It would cut the port in half, and they would saying that, justifying this huge amount of development for housing here would give them the funds they need to invest in the port, so they can make it the port of the future, which was of the original MOU and press release of what would happen here. So I think the question was, Red Hook is mostly manufacturing neighborhood. It is cut. There's lots of things to talk about if you want me to talk about the neighborhood, but it's was cut off by Robert Moses and the BQE very long time ago. So it also is a transportation desert. It's an environmental justice neighborhood. We have lots of issues here in Red Hook that haven't been addressed. They put a cruise ship terminal here in Red Hook without a lot of infrastructure support also. The EDC has got their hands in many pots here. So was there other things that you think is important for people to know about the neighborhoods?
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
Nico, go ahead.
yeah. But that covered a lot of it. The announcement, the press conference was pretty sensational. It was everybody. It was the governor. It was the mayor who really wants this to happen. And all they talked about was this port, this magical port of the future, and it was a big shiny thing. All the stuff that we want, last mile, the Blue Highway, all of that stuff. No mention of housing, very, very little. And that was back in May of last year. They wanted their plan kind of written in stone for how they were going to proceed by December. And there was an arrogance in them expecting that. Little by little, as the summer went on, and they did one great thing, they appointed a task force, which people have been asking me about this. Who are these people? I think 26 people they appointed, community leaders and some outsiders, but people in business, electeds, some friends of ours, but people from all over to sort of have a vote, which our congressman, Dan Goldman, said this would be the final say. And I think they need 2/3 of the vote. 5 times they have attempted to hold this, or 4 times. It needs to be a yes vote. And if it's a yes vote, they can proceed with this, as Victoria mentioned, this GPP process, which is state run. All decisions get taken away from the community and our electeds, and we have to do what they say for generations. Even if their agreements fall through with, let's say, NYCHA or any other agreements, why some people are reaching yes votes. A few years, a few years pass by. A developer says, "Oh, we can't. We fall through," like has happened recently over in Hudson Yards. Um, we said, "So does that go back to the community? That part of this?" No, they can move a casino in if they want. It's up to them. So it's a bad idea. And the only other point I'll make here is it's been deceptive. And I was kind of excited. All this talk about this port, it took 6 months for them. And on the very last task force meeting, private, by the way, they're not open. Uh, the very last task force meeting just before the holiday, it was on the 18th or the 17th, right before everybody disengages for 2 weeks. They announced this beautiful port. I think it was half the size of what it is now, but with all this money that they need to pay for it. In the very last page, in the last 5 minutes of that meeting, they announced, we're going to pay for it by building 7 to 9,000 market rate units along the shore, and we'll have 25% affordable housing. Boom, and then everybody goes. We had some people giving us that information right away, and the town kind of went crazy. This was deceptive. It was arrogant. There was no need for them to approach us in that way. And every one of their EDC reach outs to us, community meetings, were anything but. They were show and tells, exactly, with very, very little give and take from the community.
So just to clarify, and
But the sandwiches were good.
Okay. So you're saying there was there's a long history of things that the city had proposed or the city had explored to do with this port area, with the BMT port, dating back 15 plus years or 20 years, but that this proposal was announced publicly at the beginning of 2024 or May of 2024. Is that right?
Yes,
Correct.
it may.
And
I
then
think
okay, and so there was approximately 7 months when the conversation and the proposals, the public-facing proposals, were focused on the port itself, and only in December was the new
there was some
residential component.
there was some model building before that leading up to it, but that proposal, 7 to 9,000 units, this is what we need, was flung onto the community, including the people on the task force. Most of them didn't know anything about this. Everybody was surprised, and that left a very bad taste, because it just smacked of they had this written in stone before they even talked to us back in May. This is
So
what they want to do.
okay, so when was Voices of the Waterfront established in this timeline?
So, what happened was that once this was announced, we as the work that I do as part of the Red Hook Business Alliance was obviously asked to be on the task force, and we're so lucky to have Carly Baker there. And then the EDC started reaching out and building the task force and the advisory groups. And Resilient Red Hook obviously saw that there was a need for us to have our own voice in this process, and so we started getting community members together and having conversations about these issues outside of the spaces that the EDC was holding, and realized that this wasn't just a Red Hook issue. This was going to be impacting Columbia Waterfront and Cobble Hill and Carroll Gardens. And actually, this is a regional issue. It's not just a Red Hook issue. So we really started finding, that's why we started working with John, as he already had an active voice in Columbia Waterfront, and other allies to help us really create the coalition. And so it did start early on as Resilient Red Hook holding Red Hook meetings. I think, as August, September, once the EDC started having meetings. But by December, I think that we definitely started to realize that this was bigger than just a Red Hook issue because of its impact. And that's sort of when, it's an evolving process. It's not like, oh, we were founded on December 1st, but it took a lot of community work and trust building to and aligning on the issues that we were all impacted by, to understand what our principles were and to all of us to get there. And so it just took some time and it was an evolving process. But I think, spring of 2025, that's when we renamed ourselves, I'm pretty sure, and formed the coalition.
These other groups that she mentions and communities concurrently, they were organizing. In fact, John and his folks were first out of the gate, really making a lot of substantial noise, and being an annoyance to the EDC, which is and also folks in what they used to call the front end of town didn't know what was going on, were resentful for decisions that were being made for them, even though they do have representation on the task force by NYCHA, who has voted yes for various reasons. There's a significant portion of those people who are also part of our coalition, who you'll hear more about in the near future. Um,
Great.
so
And I'm sorry, can you just clarify which John you're referring to?
John,
he's wearing glasses, John Leva.
Okay.
Columbia
Terrific.
Waterfront, John.
Um, so what was the reaction? This is so a big component of this is introduced in December. Uh, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000. Those are market rate units, and then they were also proposing a certain number of affordable units. Is that right?
25%, and a few weeks went by, then they brought the hammer down. I think John or Victoria, did they at one point go up to 13,000?
at some point, they were threatening us with 13,000 units of housing, which would be close to 50,000 new residents, basically creating their own
Right.
and colonizing this one. They keep talking about creating their own neighborhood. Well, what about the neighborhood that already exists here?
Well, why don't we talk about that? I mean, obviously, housing is a huge issue. I live in South Slope. I've been in Sunset Park since 2016. It's an enormous issue. Everybody who runs for office, everybody who has a position of influence in the community says we have a housing crisis. The word crisis is always used. There's always a call for more housing, more affordable housing.
Yes.
Developing 10 plus thousand units of housing would be an enormous amount. I mean, it's way more. I mean, in the Sunset Park area where I'm at in the CB7 area, maybe, a 200, between 2 and 300 units, I think, have been created in, 10 years or so. So 10,000 units would be a huge amount. How did
What's the market
people
rate?
react to that, and what would be the impact of that on the community? And before you answer, I just want to remind everybody, if you have a question or a comment, feel free to raise your hand. Jeremy, I see your hand is up. Why don't we let Nico and Victoria take this question, and then we can start taking some questions as we
I'll
go.
just say that 10,000 you mentioned, those are the market rate. And in fact, our last Zoom call with Congressman Goldman, there's another tier. There's luxury housing, and then there's market rate. Those are the numbers. And then there's affordable, which has crept up from 25% to 30, and now it's at 40. And I would not be surprised if they offer 50 before too long, because there is a desperation, which should not be our on us, to get this done before the election. Adams is putting a lot of pressure on this to happen now. And there's a huge crisis in affordable housing. And in the words of our borough president, who we like more and more, Reynoso, this is one of the last ports, if not the last one. We're going to need it as time goes on. Who knows what's going on with the country? There's plenty of area, and I know there's problems. There's plenty of spaces all over the boroughs for housing, for affordable housing. Let's work on those.
So yeah, so I mean, and I see there are two hands up, so I'm just going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to call on some people.
I wanted
That's
to
all.
answer your
Yes.
question, John. Sorry. So the initial response of the community when there was this announcement on the housing part of it was outrage, because we really felt there was a lot of misdirection and gaslighting around what was really happening here. I feel like the people really already had a lot of mistrust for the EDC, and though this just dug that mistrust even deeper because of the way that they handled it. They did a really poor job, and I think it's a reflection of what we would be in store for if this actually happened, which was just again them totally misleading the community time and time again and doing what they want. So the initial reaction is a lot of frustration, and I do want to address, you know, there are great ways, especially as activists and people that are really strong allies together to work on the affordable housing crisis, and that is around the policy. There's a lot of people that want to just say build more housing, and that's going to solve our problem. I don't know a lot of people that know me here, but I do work in real estate. The supply and demand, argument that a lot of the pro housing people make is just we're never going to build our way out of this problem. What we do need to do is get all the people that want to solve this problem to work together to create policy to solve our affordable housing crisis. And there's many wonderful examples in other countries to do that. The developers are never going to, the free market is not capitalism. We have seen how that is working across this country, is not going to solve the very dire housing problem that we are in. And there is ways to address it. Throwing 10,000 units on the market. We've seen just there was an article that just came out and crunched out how much of housing that we have built. And in the neighborhoods like Gowanus, like Williamsburg, where we built a huge amount of housing, the rents haven't come down. The rents have skyrocketed. We're not solving the problem by building more housing. We need to solve the problem by creating policies to really address the root of of our social network. And capitalism, that's the dynamic that we're in right now, and we need to. And we're also working within a corrupt government right now under a mayor that has multiple corruption cases and people that are part of that corruption working for him. And he has said time and time again, I'm the friend of the real estate developer. I'm the pro housing developer. He has really made it clear who he's working for, and it's not for the people of New York, in my opinion.
Can I just clarify just one thing, and then I'm going to go to Jeremy and then to John. What is the practical impact of putting, even if it's only 6,000? Now you're saying the current proposal is 6,000 units.
What the
Both,
impact of
yeah. What's the practical impact of that many people in that
6,000
area?
market rate units. Go ahead.
Yeah, but the infrastructure impacts, we already have a traffic nightmare because of the BQE right at the head of this possible development that they don't have a solution for, right? The people are just so the one is the traffic problem. One is the resiliency issue. Like there are so many problems with this plan from a logistical and infrastructure that they have not solved for. And so there will be this will create huge amounts of speculation in Red Hook and drive out small businesses, which are the heart of this city. It will create possibly a rezoning of Red Hook. It could because of the amount of pressure open. It will cause displacement, gentrification, rents will rise, and we will lose a port that and part of the waterfront that we'll never get back again. Once something is rezoned for residential, it never gets back rezoned there. There are tons, like Nico said, there are tons of places we can put housing. We can only put a port on the water. But
And manufacturing. Very few left in New York. It's a crime, actually. That's all that's done for manufacturing.
the
And
Bloomberg administration rezoned more than 20% of our manufacturing land for residential. We've lost all that opportunity to have manufacturing and small businesses there. And
yeah,
it's just not act when we say the word manufacturing, it's not just, building things like furniture and, computer boards and phones and stuff like that. It's services. Where does your plumber, have their shop? Where does your HVAC guy have his shop? Like there are services that need manufacturing space that can't go anywhere else. And those prices are going to skyrocket if you're having to call a plumber that works out of New Jersey and pays congestion pricing and a toll to come, solve your plumbing problem.
Let me go ahead and call on three people for comments or questions. And if you want to introduce yourself, feel free. Okay, so Jeremy, go right ahead.
Hey, I'm Jeremy. I'm actually in Sunset Park, but I've been following along with this issue for a while, and I've actually gone to one or two rallies, some of the postponed rallies actually, um, of the vote. And I know people from the Carroll Gardens Association who are against it, and have been following along with this. But I think the key thing around the housing, and that I think is great for you all to emphasize, is like you said with Gowanus rezoning, what we're seeing right now with the data is that the highest rates of increase rental increases are actually in Gowanus right now. And in the neighborhoods that have actually built the most supply, they've had the three highest neighborhoods are Greenpoint, Gowanus, and I'm forgetting the other one. But they all had the largest amount of rental increases, or excuse me, supply increases of housing, because basically when you flood the zone with market rate housing, you're not going to be able, the cost of land is so expensive, you're not going to be able to build affordable housing on a lot of these places. Um, so it's been easily refuted, and I think a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking that, oh, it's so basic housing supply, we just need more of it. Whereas really the targeting of it needs to be on apartment units $1,500 and less, and that's basically like what Victoria was saying, that the private market does not build that type of housing, and that we only get that through highly subsidized or public housing. But yeah, my question was, I'm really curious, like, I think the what you keep hearing from a lot of electeds who are pushing this, it's a lack of imagination, but the reason why they go to developers and they go to real estate is because we've done this for decades, paying for public goods via selling off public assets to developers. And so this is a tried and true failed formula, that this is part of the housing crisis. But I think one of the things that's interesting to see it, and I'm curious if Voices of the Waterfront has sort of proposed like alternative means of paying for this. And I think one of the things that the Dan Goldmans or the Gennardis look at is like, we can't pay for this infrastructure, even though this is totally vital infrastructure, and many other countries know that investing in this type of infrastructure is absolutely necessary. But I'm curious if you all have thought about or sort of interested in proposing alternative means of how to alternative proposals of how to fund this, because it sounds like the port is at the end like $1 billion, $1.2 billion, and how much of that money will come back via renting out the port to, the businesses that will use it for shipping and everything, and other means. But yeah, just thinking about that, because I think at the end of the day, if you find a way, and especially I think elected officials are looking for a way to be able to say, can we do the port without this housing? And everybody's going to say, we can't fund it because, Trump is cutting this and that, federal government, we're getting no money from this. And everybody pleads sort of broke when we actually have the highest budget in city council history, the highest budget in state history, like lots of money sitting around, slushing around, and Kathy Hochul and other people at every budget insert billions of dollars in for like slush fund projects. Like we gave $500 million to the Buffalo Bills football stadium for their new stadium, but we're not putting up $1 billion for needed infrastructure.
Report.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, the new jail. Victoria, I'm going to let you do this. You know more about it, but we're looking into those things now, and we're kind
Yeah,
of putting it on the table and gathering ideas.
So
yeah.
we have brought up the funding issues multiple times. That there are ways that we can fund this without the housing. And it also can be a phased project. We don't need to have all of the money today to rebuild this, to imagine what a port of the future has to look like, because we can use examples like the Port of LA. They did a phased project to understand what the market needs and the changing market is, to meet the demands of the market, right? So we're not going to plan a port and then not change it once in 5 years, the market changes. That's why we need to make the steps from the funding we do have. And we do have a grant now to invest in only the port and not housing. And that's what we should be doing, is spending the funding that is available now instead of delaying this to add housing. Right there, they've tied the two together when they are unnecessary to do so. And so there will be opportunities in the future to find other funding to do this. And the Port Authority had a legal responsibility to maintain this port, and they did not spend the money that was allocated to them.
10
And
years, was it, Victoria? 15 years? How long? It's a long time.
since the 70s, the tripartite
They let
was
the
started
port,
in the 70s.
docks are rotting
And they let it dilapidate on purpose, and but also because the Port Authority is not interested in developing ports. They're airplanes, and trains and buses were much more their focus and taking time. But they could do a lot of things. They can use pilots just for the port if they wanted to, but they're, no, we're going to use pilots just for the housing. They can get creative here. It is a lack of imagination. And I think that is a problem that can be solved if you put the right people in the room. But we do have the funding right now to fix the piers and do other maintenance things and sign long-term leases and agreements. One of the problem has been and why the port isn't making any money and has fallen is because the EDC has refused to give any of the tenants long-term leases and actually has pushed out a lot of the tenants. So, it's by design that it's a self-created problem. If we were going through the Board of Standards Appeals, it's a self-created harm. They don't deserve to rezone this because they created the problem. So it just instead of talking about Whole Foods rezoning, in Gowanus, we're now talking about the EDC. It's just changed from the private sector doing it to the government doing it to ourselves. Let's give away our public land to private developers. And it's really such a shame.
Why don't
John.
we?
Yeah.
Yes. Can we go to John Leyva?
John
Why
Leyva.
don't you?
Please bring up the concrete and the threats.
Yeah, and John, can you introduce yourself for people who are not familiar with who you are and your background here and your work in the area?
Yeah, my name is John Leyva, and I've lived here 30 years on Tiffany Street, which is right off Columbia. I live half a block from the BQE and a block away from Pier 9B. So I'm like right in the middle. And I bring that up because these arguments come up of YIMBY, NIMBY, or whatever. We've proposed for them to build over the ditch, which is just a block away. So like that's 10 to 12 city blocks where they can build on top of, and it would solve a lot of problems.
Can you explain what that is, John?
And yes, well, building housing on top of the ditch. I mean, I don't know.
The ditch is
The ditch. What the ditch is?
Yeah, the BQE ditch, right? Which has been problematic since day one, 75 years ago. It would solve that problem, and it would solve some of the problem with housing. Now, it's contextual building, not skyscrapers there either, but something that fits the community. And 10 to 12 city blocks, that's an ample space to build some housing. Now, the problem, what I wanted to say is that the problem with this whole process has been from day one, this was supposed to end in 4 months. Now, what other city project of this magnitude has taken 4 months to develop? And and the way that they did it was very disingenuous because they called it redevelopment this, but they never really said what it really was a rezoning. Like when the task force signed up for this, 28 members, right? They told them this would be, we're gonna redevelop the piers. And they said, okay, yeah, that'll take 4 months, right? It shouldn't be that bad. And they just kept adding and they kept throwing in this housing and all of a sudden now there's 7,000 and then there's 12,942 and then now we're back to, so it's been total chaos. And then I was on one of the advisory groups, as was Victoria. She can tell you, we had no input. It was just, this whole thing was just checking off boxes. Like, okay, we had one meeting, we had two meetings, and all. It was nothing. We when you say, Jeremy, rightfully, right? How can you? We haven't been allowed to really put in a plan, an alternate plan or anything. Like it's either an ultimatum, it's either this or that. And throughout this whole thing, these 5 postponements, it's been these ultimatums, like if you don't do it now, we're gonna lose the money. Turns out we didn't do it, and we haven't lost the money yet. If you don't do it now, you're not gonna be including the city budget. It was ridiculous. If you don't do it now, and it's always something where it almost feels like you're dealing with a used car salesman, right? Like there's a limited time offer, and if you don't do it this minute, and it's just been a joke. It's been a farce. So like, thankfully, our electeds have held strong and said, no, this is not, this doesn't make sense.
Very lucky to have 2.
And they made it, but to the people that say, which we're trying to get to yes, I don't understand where, because it's based on lies too. Then when we haven't had a full financial breakdown, we've been breaking it down on why these peers, according to them, in their own grant proposal, this was going to cost $190 million to rehabilitate Pier 9 on 10, because that's still okay, just needs to maintenance or whatever, and then to tear down 9A and 9B and make it a marginal pier. That was going to cost $190 million according to their own application. So how did that get to $1.7 billion? Nobody's really been able to understand. And if you look at the map of the way that they're doing it, it's just that they're going so far out with the piers to allow the land to be for housing, and that's what's made this exponentially more expensive than it needs to be. Like if you look at marginal piers, one of the advantages to marginal piers is that they're along the piers. They come out somewhat, but not that far out. But they're making it all the way out just so they can save the land. So this is costing us more for their housing thing. And this is what the EDC has done. Like, this is their cookie cutter approach. They go to these waterfronts, right? And they promise them a beautiful esplanade somewhere where you can go walk your dog and sit on a bench. And then, but this one is different because this is a working waterfront. This is the last working waterfront in Brooklyn. So, we need to preserve this type of land. So this is not a like a housing or not or whatever. This is a proper land use argument here. And that this land already has a use. I don't want to monopolize and talk more than I have to, but this land already has a use.
And John, just to say again, your experience as somebody who's been involved in this process, because I often ask questions and am very interested in the way these things work practically. You're saying that this plan over the months just sort of changed, like it would be one plan in one meeting, and then suddenly it would be a different plan, but you feel like but those plans were coming from EDC directly. They would change.
Just from the EDC. I'll give you an example. Jim Tampakas, he's one of the task force members. He has an alternate plan. He hasn't been able to present it properly because they haven't allowed for that. They just, every meeting, and those are closed door meetings, by the way, that we don't see anything what goes on in those meetings, right? But every meeting they tell them, okay, this is what's happening now. This is what's happening now. And that's it. But it's not like they're part of the planning process, and much less us as a community. We're not part of the planning process at all either.
No, what we've heard is that the EDC then hears what one member of the task force needs the plan to change to get to yes, and then they'll change the plan to hope to get them to change their vote, right? And then, we're going to make this other edit and try and get to yes, because they're trying to manipulate the people on the task force to get them this carte blanche to do what they want on the site, which is to even start the GPP process, because they put in a task force to say, okay, we're going to go through this visioning session and we need to get 2/3 approval so we can even start the GPP process. So the plan has changed to try to manipulate the outcome so it is in their benefit. It is not the benefit of the community.
And I see, Elise, you have your hand up and you've been waiting patiently. I'm going to go to you in a second, but just a kind of simple question here, though. I mean, could somebody argue that that's a democratic process because they are responding to the priorities of people on the task force?
But who picked the task force?
Yeah, how was that? How was that selected?
They were handpicked by the EDC, and there's people on there that are going to be allowed to respond to RFPs and to actually be part of developing this process. So they have skin in the game, and I think that isn't I don't think it's democratic. With these people who weren't elected, there are some elected officials on there, but the people that they were asked to represent the community don't necessarily are doing it in earnest.
And it's important to know, John, that there isn't somebody who lives in the Columbia Street waterfront on the 28-member task force, on the voting task force. And we submitted names. We begged and pleaded for them to add somebody with them. We're going to be the most impacted because we got the most housing.
Impacted. That's right.
And nobody from this area that represents this area is on the task force.
Thank you for the clarification on that point. Why don't we go to Elise? We have about 15 minutes left, so we'll go to Elise, and then I was going to ask a couple more questions about the process going forward. Elise, go right ahead. And if you want to introduce yourself, Elise, feel free.
Sure. My name's Elise. I live near the Greenwood Cemetery in South Park Slope. I guess my question is about what your coalition sees as the point of leverage. I listened to something on YouTube that was organized by, I forget the name of the organization, but John, you were the moderator of it was a meeting that was held in March.
The City Club.
Yeah,
Yes.
the City Club. And yeah, you did a great job. And
Did.
a couple of other people were speaking, a professor.
Yeah.
And it seems like they're trying to extract control to a state-run agency over this large, project.
That's right.
And, Assembly Member Simon was discussing how engagement is a farce, and it's problematic in lots of different levels. So I'm curious what you guys in your coalition, what you think, what we can do to help. Like, what do you realistically think we could do to change the course of this?
That's such a great question. So I think that we're focused right now on base building and building our allies. We feel like that. I definitely feel like we are aligned with other communities like Coney Island and LIC1 and Bushwick Inlet Park. If you guys are not familiar with these issues, it's something, you should look into it, that we're taking public land and we're handing it over to private developers. And, for me, the dichotomy really is understanding that this isn't about building affordable housing. This is really about how do we make rich people richer? And it's capitalism. Developers, what's the most I work in real estate, it's very lucrative, and that's why there's so much money in the government around it, and why Eric Adams is making so many promises and trying to keep his real estate interest happy. It's one of a very powerful a group of people here in New York City. So I think that really trying to understand that we're just taking the most vulnerable population and not addressing their needs and trying to address and make happy the richest people in this country right now. And I think that that's how we need to frame these conversations, these rezonings, these redevelopments. And the best thing you can do is start getting on the same page about shaping the real issues here for people. This isn't a housing issue. This isn't a NIMBY thing. This is about why are we taking public land and giving it to the most lucrative and successful group, and handing it over to them. And so it's about making sure that we're all educated and understand how we can work together to address the affordable housing issue from a policy standpoint and not from flooding the market with units of housing.
And also in sync with how so many people feel now, as opposed to maybe 20 years ago, where they accept something like Citizens United. They accept PACs. They accept the amounts of money that people are making that are way beyond what people were, what a tiny percentage of people were allowed to up until the mid 80s, and then growing until now. This can't be the future. And there's actually huge pushback right now. I think we're just seeing the beginning of it. To have two Democratic contenders not step away when they're beaten in June is really, it's not only ungentlemanly, it's just wrong. I detect some purpose in the rest of the country these days. It's not really coagulating yet, but in this community, it is.
Let me just, we've got about 10 minutes left. I wanted to just ask you to respond to Andrew Gennardis's op-ed from 2 months ago, obviously State Senator Andrew Gennardis. As you know, he wrote that throughout this engagement, one thing has become clear. There's no unified vision for how the terminal should be developed. Some neighbors say the entire site should remain maritime. Others don't support keeping it an active port at all in Brooklyn. Some believe the whole site should be parkland. Others think the site should be leveraged to build affordable housing. The proposal now before the task force represents a compromise of the many ideas and priorities that have emerged from this nearly year-long process. And he talked about all of the engagement that his office has done surrounding this. Just what's your top line reaction to that? He says that this is an attempt to bring together a lot of different opinions. People have different priorities and different goals, and you're going to have to compromise, and that this is already a compromise.
This is Brooklyn, right? So if you ask 15 people, you're going to get 17 different opinions. But the majority is on our side. The majority. Now, you have these little radical housing groups or whatever that they just want to build anywhere and everywhere and whatever, and without any consequence to anything else. And like Jeremy put it so eloquently, like it's just, whenever we've seen these rezonings here in Brooklyn, it's been disastrous for the neighbors, for the people that are there, for the community that's there.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid that? Sorry, Spot.
I totally agree, John. And I want to thank John and Nico for being such amazing allies, and the work that we have put in so many man hours advocating for our communities. And I want to just tell them and thank you everybody so much for showing up tonight and being interested in what's happening here and appreciate it because it's really the people that are shaping and have advocated for this community, or else we would have, the EDC and Goldman and Gennardis would have already done whatever they wanted here. And so to answer what Gennardis's statement about what this compromise is, I totally believe in compromise but I also believe in bringing the community with you and educating you. And what they have done is done a top-down plan, trying to shove it through down our throats. Like this is what we're doing. It doesn't matter. You need to educate and involve the community. There's a reason that their community boards exist and why communities have voices is because they know their communities best and what they need. And we don't need this project. There might be a citywide housing, but why are we putting all of the burdens on this one community to solve the problems of the whole city? Especially when they haven't solved any of our problems right now. And on top of that, to address what he said, really is that, you talked about the compromise, and I was going somewhere with that, is that he keeps on saying, don't worry, I'm going to make sure this project happens like this. Don't worry. He's not going to be around. This is a 20, 30, 40-year generational project that he's not going to be in office to make sure what they commit to today ends up there. And we have learned our lessons from the Amazon proposal, GPP, from the Atlantic Yards, that they can continuously change this and there isn't accountability. That's why they're using a GPP, is because there isn't accountability. And so we can't trust the process that they're going through and the structure that they're using to know that whatever we agree to and we compromise on is going to, at the end of the day, what it's going to look like. So if they created an accountability structure and walked away from the GPP plan and did it a different way, that there was checks and balances, I feel like but we've lost our faith, especially in this administration, with how many people are paying off people to not get a bike lane pass. And that's what we know about. What do we don't know about? I mean, that's a tiny little bike lane. What other corruption and money hands to push through other people's agendas? And so until we have faith in a system where there's somebody running it that we know will be accountable, we can't trust the process and the politicians that are driving something through that benefits, again, the richest people in the city and doesn't benefit this community. I'm waiting to see the community benefits that will actually give back to the community that exists now and not the community that they're creating for 20 or 30. Because most of the people that are here now are not going to be living in this neighborhood in 20 or 30 and are not going to reap the benefits of whatever this development is. Where are the things that we deserve today?
I can't say enough about our council member, Alexa Vilas. She has proven time and time again, at least to me, in my opinion, that she cares more about what's best for a community and is a humanist than she does about reelection. And that was certainly proven in this last election, which was very much stacked against her, and she won. Very quickly, and I have to say this about Gennardis, who asked a lot of the right questions early on and was suspicious. He never did a community reach out, not a proper one. He did one in June after he had already tried to lobby many of his fellow task force members in order to form a yes coalition. And it had to do with upping the affordable housing to 50%. And it had to do with offering NYCHA $2 million up front. And I believe that's where they're heading, EDC. And I don't believe he spearheaded that. I think it was EDC. Mike from CB6 signed on to this, and a few other people. And that's been in the works. So there was never a community reach out. The only community reach out that he advertised as a community reach out was an EDC partnership. And it smelled like that as soon as you walked in. And it was EDC. They were right there on the stage telling us what they were going to do and listening to all of us poor souls.
Thank you. We have about 9 minutes left. I would like to go to George and then to John. And then I had one sort of closing question about the process going forward and also your message for elected officials. So George, if you want to go ahead, you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself if you'd like, and then we'll go to John after you.
Yes, I'm George Fiala, and I publish the local newspaper here in Red Hook. And I'll be very brief, which is that I think that any further engagement with EDC just helps to legitimize the process. I believe the process is wrong. EDC should not be involved. Department of City Planning should be involved. And we need to just hope that we have to make them go away and say, we don't want them. It's not correct. If we need lawyers, do it that way and start with a fresh process that starts with thinking about, our maritime, our ports first, and any housing issues secondary. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, George. John, go right ahead.
Actually, Victoria covered some of what I was going to say, but along with what George just said, this is a very pragmatic, reasonable neighborhood. And I've told them this from the beginning. We've asked for a town hall with the whole task force and the community, and that's never been able to happen. They kept us separated at all times, separate groups here, there. And like, we have never said no. Like, when we say no, it's for this particular vision plan. We have never said no. Other communities could just, no, you're not going to do that here. And that's it. No, we've never said no. We just said no to this one. And then what Jerry Nadler came here and said, just fix the piers, which that's what the grant money is for. And anything else can go through Europe. Now, we shouldn't even say that. We should just say no and no and no is no. But we're saying anything else, we're willing to listen to hear you out, but let's use the proper process. Because as Victoria pointed out, the GPP, like we have two projects here to look at. And I don't care what you think about the two projects personally, but we have Atlantic Yards and Gowanus, right? Atlantic Yards, 20 years later, still a mess. Gowanus, whether you like it or not, it's humming along. It's humming along, and it seems to be, doing what it's supposed to do, whether you like it or not. So that's all we're saying. Give us that plan, if anything, not the GPP where it's going to be a mess 20 years from now, and developers go bankrupt and this and that, and then we have to live with all that. No. We can't accept that here.
People don't forget, because most of us weren't alive during it, about what urban renewal did to this city and why community boards and community power was given to communities, because who's looking out for the best interests of communities is communities, not top-down planning. And this continues to be a top-down plan, not a community-based plan, not a plan that, we can create a regional port plan, and we can have community engagement, and we can get to a space where we feel that this project benefits what needs to happen for this community. But this is an EDC plan. This is a political plan meant for real estate developers. And the people that are voting yes for it really are mostly interested in making sure that the constituents of and funders of the politicians at play here are happy with getting, what they want. I wanted to say that related companies lobbied the mayor's office specifically to redevelop Red Hook. You can look it up. Like, the powers that be, there's a story here. We need to follow the story and understand what is manipulating and controlling this process. And it's not for the benefit of creating affordable housing to solve the housing crisis. It's about making people money.
I also
have the free market solve all our problems. We need to figure out ways. Listen, if we could we keep creating systems to to address the symptoms of actual problems, like building jails. It doesn't solve, our crime rate, right? Let's try to figure out the root of the problems and diagnose the root and the disease, not keep addressing the symptoms of the problem by building more housing, by creating more jails, by creating more homeless shelters, we need to really understand the symptoms of not just the symptoms, but the root of the problem.
Very interesting. I mean, I consider myself a very pro-build person when it comes to housing, but it sounds like you're saying that at least in terms of market rate housing, that's not necessarily going to help.
I'll send you some articles, John. And,
sure.
And we're happy to have a conversation and also help you understand the root of the NIMBY conversation and how, really the people that are advocating for more development, you are just advocating for developers. And once you get there, and to understand it, it's really, we're just picketing for people that are already in power.
We need the middle class back. And I don't think I'm too naive thinking that can happen, particularly middle. We need a healthy middle class. We're turning into Dubai little by little.
Let me just close with one more question, because obviously the vote never happened. Right? The vote never happened. It kept being postponed. And so the last email that I got in July from Voices of the Waterfront said, it is the height of hypocrisy for Congressman Goldman to stand in Washington proclaiming he is fighting for democracy while back home in New York, he's actively suppressing it. His fingerprints are all over this latest postponement of the Brooklyn Marine Terminal, a transparent political ploy designed to push through a deeply unpopular plan under the guise of progress. This is exactly why Democrats are losing ground nationally. They talk about defending democracy, but undermine it in their own backyards. Goldman and Gennardis' actions, backed by a corrupt mayor more interested in real estate deals than climate resilience or community needs, show utter contempt for local voices. So a pretty blunt statement there. Obviously, we're all members of the local Democratic Party here in 8051. So your message to elected Democrats, and what do you want Democratic constituents, people who who are part of the party, to be doing and saying to Democratic elected officials right now?
I think that one, John,
the other two Democrats not walking away after Mamdani won. It's akin to that.
I think that one, John, came after one vote was postponed, and they led us to believe that Goldman was gonna fight for education or something, and he was really voting for the crypto bill with the Republicans. So I think he's salty about that.
You should have got one more email after that, John, about the last rally we had. So that was, I'm not going to take credit for writing that, but we all agreed that what Goldman was doing by not showing up for the vote and delaying it 1 week so that he could be in town where he could have, everybody else was meeting by Zoom. It was such a farce to try to keep pressuring the people that were saying no to this to try to get them to yes, and pushing, turning the screws, in my opinion. So,
and they came right up to every date, right? We're going to have the vote. We're going to have the vote. We're going to have the four times at least, maybe 5 times. And then now we're going to postpone it. And there was always some excuse. Gennardis actually said something, said, you know what, I forgot what it was. There were 2 things that he mentioned. And what was the truth was they didn't have the votes. So,
right.
So we pick another date. This is democracy.
So I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I did read that from the 17th. I see that there was another email on July 23rd.
Come on.
Where you were again talking about these decisions to postpone the votes. But obviously, I mean, am I correct in saying the point of view of Voices is you don't want to just keep postponing votes like this?
Well, John, think about democracy, right? So because you don't have the votes, you don't postpone an election, right? Until you have them. So they've been postponing it and twisting people's arms and making side deals and giving this one this and this one that or whatever. And then so it's like it's undemocratic. Like we had them beat fair and square. We had the no votes. If they would have had the votes on those days, it would have been a no and this would have been over with. But it's not over. That would be the beginning of a rightful development plan, maybe. You know, we can sit down and actually work this out. That's just no to that plan. And I want to make that specific. It's not no to nothing and to forever. Right. It's just no to that plan, and let us then have a community-led, a community-based. We have a great relationship, Victoria, with Pratt and all of them. They're willing to be a part of this, and we're all willing to do this together, and there shouldn't be a problem. And maybe we do this together and we come to the same conclusion that we need, but I doubt it. I really do doubt it, because it's just, but we've never had the chance. That's all we're asking for, the chance to present a proper plan.
Have a real, let's help, if we're going to say use democracy, let's really be democratic and not like you guys keep saying, change the vote and change the date just because we don't have the votes. That's not democratic.
So postpone
it doesn't look good on the people that are, like we said, advocating for democracy naturally, but in their own backyard, not holding themselves accountable. It's about accountability. And that's why we can't trust moving forward in this process when they don't hold themselves accountable.
And sort
of
last question
is what we're broadcasting.
So vote now. You want to take the vote. You think the vote will be no, and then that will open up space for the next
they're getting
phase.
Busy. They're being very busy now, and I do believe.
What do you think? Just your last
50% is going to be offered, and that's going to be very hard for Shahana to turn down. Unfortunately, who we love, but she's a politician, and it looks good to have 50%, that you fought for 50%. For affordable housing in a neighborhood like Red Hook.
I think that, getting to a no vote now and or saying, hey, listen, we're going to take 2 years and we're going to do a real process. We don't have to vote. I'm fine with, saying we're not going to vote now. Let's create, but they need to commit to a 2-3 year process.
Yeah.
That's what it took for bridging Gowanus for the Gowanus rezoning, and create checks and balances and accountability, and not let this be in this task force, governance space like they've done with Atlantic Yards, where they can manipulate and change the plan moving forward.
You may be part of this conversation, but the no votes are talking. The leaders in the no votes are talking about this right now, just not participating and offering something else. Yeah, no, this is.
And I think we want to do this under not an administration that's in bed with real estate developers, and an administration that is committed to democracy and has a socialist view, social democratic view, not a socialist
Social
view,
democratic.
democratic view on how public land should be used. If we got to that, hey, listen, we're gonna be able to figure out how we can do 100% affordable housing here, and this was the best opportunity for us to develop something, I'm always open to being creative and thinking outside the box, but let's start with a timeline and a structure where it puts community at the front of this conversation and at front of this community,
Yeah.
the planning process, not, just a checkbox.
Before the troops get here.
Oh, God.
Well, thank you all very much for your time. That's a sobering note to end on, but I really want to thank everyone who has contributed to the conversation. I would love to be able to continue talking about this, both within the local Democratic Party and just more broadly.
I
So,
can't thank you enough for actually spearheading this. Thank you, John.
of course, my pleasure, and thank you for your work, and thanks everyone for your time and comments. And I look forward to speaking again about this important issue.
John, do you mind if we stop the recording? We'll stay on for 5 minutes?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. Let's